So that's a good segue. So Michelle, as businesses strive to stay customer centric, the need to reboot or refresh their voice of customer initiatives becomes ever more critical. As we know, customer expectations are continually evolving. We've talked about that. Perhaps what worked in the past is not going to meet the demands of today's discerning customers who leave after one bad experience and don't tell you, customers who have little tolerance for a bad experience. And I know you're thinking like there's a question in there somewhere, right? And this is it. So how should customers approach this much needed reboot or refresh in light of these customer dynamics?
Absolutely. So, okay. Right now, you're looking at existing CX programs be defunded within organizations. And a lot of that has to do with it's not clear how it is connecting to the outcomes of the business. And this is a real struggle for CX leaders. And we can kind of talk a little bit more about that. However, I want to spend a second to just say, what have I seen as sort of indicators that maybe your program does need a refresh? So maybe you've got all this great technology, it's showing up, customer, charts and graphs are showing up in the meetings.
Right.
You have a signal in the office. Yeah. If you're in the office, there's a poster on the wall that says, we care about customers. It's in your mission statement. You see it everywhere, all these visual cues, yet you're not really seeing it influence how work is getting done. And a couple of things that could just sort of trigger you on, all right, maybe this needs a refresh is number one, you are churning customers, you're losing revenue. Something is going on within your business. It could be from COVID, how your customers shop now. I mean, there's a lot of factors, but the way you used to do business doesn't necessarily apply anymore. So if you start losing customers and you really don't truly understand why, voice of the customer is a great place to really think about, how do I refresh what I'm exploring, what information I'm gathering in order to better inform. I think the second thing is you could see an increase in customer complaints. You could see declines in like your ratings and reviews. Again, going back to customers are going to nudge you and tell you you're not getting this right. How are you using that information to then influence and inform the future? And then kind of another heavy third one I see is you have your technology in place, but you don't see engagement around that data and information. It's become a big paperweight or a chart or graph, but it's not actually informing anything. And I think that, from my own experience, just CX is most effective, like I said, when you're using what they do and what they say. So if surveys are your only source of insight and you are not, and you are addressing things, pain that's already happened. So you're being, reactive to what's going on. You really have to balance that with gaining insight and information to inform you what is happening now or begin to predict. And there's a lot of ways to do that. You just have to step outside of probably how you've traditionally done your work and what stakeholders you are working with in order to get you where you are around your CX strategy.
When you're working with clients, what percentage of them typically have a well-documented voice of customer strategy?
It's typically very ambiguous. It's more focused around the outcome metric, the number. So it's not necessarily built around, one of the things that right? You build around not the outcome, you drive accountability around the behaviors that are going to get you to the outcome. Because how many times have you delivered, let's use the sales organization as an example. How many times have you worked with a salesperson that their close rate is great? They are bringing in the business. Customers do not renew. customers complain because they were a heavy closer. So while their numbers look really good initially, the lifetime value and the value they bring and the cost of servicing and correcting all the things they didn't do well, does it really make it worth it? And oftentimes it doesn't. So you really have to look at the behaviors and play the long game in terms of measuring your success and not just the data point for the day, because you can so easily manipulate that. And then people are questioning like, well, our numbers going up, yet I'm not seeing the direct correlation to our business performance. And that is a shortfall, a downfall of narrow customer experience strategies.
When we started this discussion, you used the term wisdom, and that just kind of echoed loudly in that statement, because selecting the right KPI is as important as anything here in this process. And then really holding yourself in check to not engineer the outcome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you find that within inside of the organizations that there is a heavy drive towards, let's understand the truth of this? Or is it like any other part of the organization, like you just mentioned, the sales part of the organization, where there are specific numbers already on the table that people need to hit? And so when they're hired into that position, they're hired into that position because we want better NPS scores and we want better CSAT and help us get there. Maybe antithetical to what the true nature of this discovery should be?
Well, I think what you hit on is the answer could be yes for both, because this is where that company's culture comes into play. What do they really want to do here? Do they want to deliver the KPI and that's it? Because I've certainly worked with those organizations where I'm fighting the how and I'm really challenging the behaviors and the beliefs and the values of the company, the way to get there. And it has been, I just need the number, because the number means we get the bonus check, and I'm just playing the short game, quarter to quarter. So I think that's a struggle with a lot of CX professionals, because they want to, they really want to change that culture of the company, but the company doesn't have the appetite for that, really.
Yeah, there's down pressure.
Yes. And it's real. However, there are other scenarios where, yes, the company's like, okay, we really have to get this right. And I find that the younger, or if there's a heavy growth period, that a company just is in a different mindset. Like they're not, like I said in the very beginning, they're not yet so bogged down by the voice and influence of all of their stakeholders internally. They are really listening to what the customer is telling them that can shape how they do business. So then creating systems and processes and checkpoints and, KPIs throughout the life cycle become more and more important, because they want to verify the quality along the way. And let me bring it to life with like an example, right? Because this feels a little bit conceptual.
Right.
So, as an example, so there was a situation with a financial services company that I worked with, and everything was mobilized around digital transformation. Like it was in the early digital transformation days.
Okay.
And that was the priority for the company, right? We have to shift from a old school manual process to a digital process. Well, that's great. However, what the outcome metric was, let's say downloads. Are we getting enough downloads?
Okay.
All right. Now, what was happening on the back end is you had customers who, yes, were doing the downloads, but you had a lot of them that were deleting it. So they weren't necessarily active users. And when that was brought forward in terms of, hey, they're not sticking yet, and here are the reasons why, there was zero appetite to talk about that KPI. The appetite was about how many downloads. And you think about what you were seeing in that space at the time, that was the KPI, right?
Right.
So you're shaking the trees in a way that maybe the company didn't have the appetite for at the time. Eventually, you know, like with that particular situation, it sort of righted itself, right? As you started to realize, okay, that's not going to work long term, but it took a while to get there. So the CX leader coming in with that perspective was not really a welcomed voice, because in that scenario, you're kind of calling the baby ugly is how it's received. So how you show up and how you present information as a partner and collaborator versus, you know, I'm going to shake my finger at you and reprimand what you're not doing for the customer becomes really more important if you are going to be successful.